What did Australia do that was so bad when it handled the pandemic? Because I talked to a lot of people in Australia, and they're interested in America, like the stuff that's happening bad in America. Because I feel like, to me, and I could be totally wrong when I say this, Stacey, Australia seems like a great place. It seems like, I mean, I'm sure, some of it's getting worse, like everywhere in the world, but it feels like Australia is one of the last kind of like untouched, kind of happy places in the world, in my opinion. But I'm not there. So what is Australia really like?
Look, Australia is a lovely place to live. It gets a bit hot, which I don't like, but it's a good lifestyle. You pay for it, though, because we get taxed absolutely through the wazoo down here. So if you like a nice lifestyle and you're happy to cop some really high taxes, you'll probably enjoy it. As to what happened during COVID, basically I realized that a lot of our politicians, I think, in my opinion, are actually megalomaniacal psychopaths. A bunch of them had state elections to win as well around that time. Like the idiot who runs my home state of Queensland, Anastasia Palaszczuk, had an election. So she basically won because she deliberately terrified all the old people in Queensland into voting for her by telling them that if she didn't shut the border to New South Wales, the state down south, they were all going to die. We saw a similar thing in Western Australia. They effectively seceded from the nation. They shut their border for something like over a year. And then you head down to Melbourne, you've got the idiot who runs Victoria, a guy called Daniel Andrews, who kept basically the entire population of the state under house arrest by telling them they were all going to die. And when people protested them, he shot them with rubber bullets. And remember, it is not legal to carry a gun in Australia. So you have all these civilians and tradies down in Melbourne peacefully protesting. They get shot by the cops with rubber bullets. So that is what happened in Australia. It was very sad. I don't know what happened to my countrymen. They just sort of gave into it. I think Australians have a very toxic relationship with the state. We're happy to believe that rights come from politicians rather than being inherent and God-given. It was very sobering to see that. We're out of it now, but you know what, Alex? Part of me is just waiting for those megalomaniacal psychopaths in Australian politics to do it again. And that's not a very happy thought, let me tell you.
No, it's really not. And I think Australia is kind of the beta testing for the New World Order, for what they want to do all over. So did you know anybody that had to go to a COVID camp and be locked in?
Camp.
I didn't know people who had to go to one of the quarantine camps. I did know a few people who had to go through hotel quarantine when they came back in from overseas, because obviously we shut our international border. That was 2 weeks in a hotel, which is not set up to be a quarantine kind of area because of the air conditioning. There were people in isolation in random hotels who still caught COVID because it came through the air conditioning vents. Like, the whole thing was so completely stupid. And let me tell you, like, it might sound nice being cooped up in a hotel for 2 weeks. When you have no fresh air and it's just you, people just went loopy. There were cases of suicides. It was terrible for people's mental health. But this was what, the opinion polls were telling the government was sort of the right thing to do. So they just kept doing it, again, because they wanted to win elections. It makes me quite sick.
I remember seeing on Instagram, there were a few women, I think that went very viral. They had to go to the camps. They were there for a few weeks at a time. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah, I think they were posting sort of gorgeous pictures of themselves in bikinis. Actually,
I don't know why it went viral, but I mean, it was very disturbing.
Oh, it was really disturbing. Yeah, the quarantine camp you're talking about, I think it was the one in the Northern Territory, which is like desert, basically, around there, and it was looked sort of like community housing. But no, you were not allowed to leave. It was like this weird, strange little camp. No one was allowed to talk to each other out there in the middle of nowhere. We had one in Queensland as well called Well Camp, which sort of lasted for all of 5 minutes. That was a colossal failure. It was meant to house thousands of people, but I think only like 1,000 people came through, and now it's all shut down. So that was another stupid waste of money. But it was really disturbing seeing Australian citizens just being sent either to these hotel quarantines or like out bush because they'd come back in from overseas. It was really quite frightening. And I think a lot of the population's everyone's sort of looking over their shoulder. Like, there's a feeling that people are a little bit kind of traumatized by it. It was really, really upsetting.
Well, we talked about all the serious stuff. Now we got to get to what I love the most, and that's pussy. And I'm not talking about the kind you're thinking of. I love cats. I have toxoplasmosis. I have
My grind so refined, I got no time for no games. Ask yourself